Hi, and welcome to another episode of Unmatched After Action Reports. I'm Sojan, and today we have a playthrough of Sherlock vs. Bigfoot, battling it out on the rooftops of Soho. It's been a while since I played Bigfoot, and it seems to be the consensus that Sherlock is a pretty good counter to him. Then I can see why though. If Sherlock plays smartly, he will simply outlast Bigfoot in an exhaustion game. The threat of confirmed suspicions will encourage Bigfoot to not hold larger than lives in hand, and use them as soon as possible. This just makes it easier for Sherlock to predict when they are going to hit, and elementaries and deduced strategies will totally defang those 6 strength attacks easily. Uh, and annoyingly, counter punches are amazing against Bigfoot too, as even though both Sherlock and Bigfoot have the same starting hit points of 16, Sherlock has some pretty decent healing capability from Watson, about a total of 4 I think. If you ask me, Sherlock needs about 1 or 2 lesser hit points to be better balanced overall. Right now, in the hands of a competent player, Sherlock just has what I would argue to be the most number of good matchups against the current roster of unmatched characters. As for Bigfoot, I think he's actually the hardest to play of all the big three. Big three meaning him, Medusa, and Sherlock, especially against equally or better skilled players. Bigfoot, I think, only does seem overbearing against newer players, as he will absolutely wreck face if the opponent is not familiar with the tempo of Bigfoot, who likes to hang back for a while and then swing in for huge damage before running away. So being careful of positioning is the main way you deal with Bigfoot and Jackalope, being aware of crashing through the trees and Jackalope horns. Anyway, moving on to the match. So pretty decent starting hand. Started with Jackalope horns. Sherlock starts first. It does the typical double maneuver. So no reason for Sherlock to be aggressive early. So one thing to note is that you always want to keep Sherlock and Watson by each other most of the time against this matchup, because you don't want the Jackalope horns to come in right between them and cut either one of them off. So my turn, just filling out the position, threatening Jackalope horns. So one thing that I like to do is with Bigfoot is to use the Jackalope as much as possible at the start, going in with momentous shifts and stuff like that, and only when it dies, moving later with Bigfoot. But I think a better play would be to actually threaten both of them at the same time, rather than using the Jackalope as a missile at the start. So if you slowly move in Bigfoot at the same time, you can kind of threaten savageries, larger than lives, and the like. Right? So Sherlock doing Sherlock things, confirm suspicions for 4. Tends to be a pretty good call against Bigfoot, because you'll be able to knock out savageries for 3, hoaxes for 2, or even a skirmish, but that's only 1, but still knocking skirmish out is pretty decent, I think. So going with a Jackalope horns and trying to do as much damage to Watson as I can. Hits him with a momentous shift. So the next thing he does is that during Sherlock's turn, he attacks me with Sherlock. So more often than not, Sherlock players will only attack with Sherlock when they have the game is afoot. What the other versatile cards, they usually tend to use it for defense. So anyway, in any case, I was expecting either a game is afoot, or even if it was one of those 3 attacks, I didn't mind. Just use skirmish to block. So I only took 1 point of damage for the Jackalope. So alright, and here we have a pretty interesting play by Sherlock. We both drew up to 7, and I think he actually used Master of Disguise to boost his movement right up next to the Jackalope. So I think he wanted to kill the Jackalope, but don't think it was worth it using Master of Disguise to boost it. So what I could actually have done is, that's just a point of damage on me. And with Watson, he could possibly start putting on some pressure on Bigfoot. So anyway, he hits me with deduce strategy with Sherlock, which actually sets me up very nicely because with the hoax movement, I could move through his units, move through his fighters, and end up right next to Watson, allowing me to finish the job the next turn. So if you're playing against Bigfoot, always beware of hoax. If you're trying to protect your sidekick, try to position it such that hoax or jackalope horns or something can't just easily get behind them. So try to bluff and attack. I didn't really have that many good cards at this point in time. Couldn't really use momentous shift because that was simply a 3. So wanting to draw more cards, I played a regroup. And there was no defense at all. This allowed me to draw even more cards and probably figuring out that he didn't have any good Watson defenses. I just finished Watson off with unboosted momentous shift in the sense that it was only a 3. So Watson was dead. So at this point in the game, I thought I was feeling good about my chances as Bigfoot. Again, I had a lot of Bigfoot cards in hand, so I think if I played a bit smarter, I should be a bit closer and trying to threaten them with savageries and larger than lives. So with Watson dead and Sherlock not having used any of the healing abilities, coupled with Watson's 5 damage attacks, I thought it was in pretty good shape. But Sherlock uses an instance, he tries to finish off the jackalope. So I bluff another big attack with a skirmish or something, but it was simply a regroup. And this drew out a counter punch from Sherlock. As Bigfoot, I was okay to see a counter punch being used here. Better to see it used on a jackalope rather than Bigfoot himself. So this ran away because I thought this was the time to bring in Bigfoot and let jackalope hang back. Sherlock does a surprising play here though. So I thought I could avoid the jackalope being killed this turn. But Sherlock actually boosted his movement with a deduce strategy to get up right next to the jackalope. I'm not very sure this was a mistake. I really wasn't expecting this because he only had 5 cards in hand. So expecting a double maneuver. He did surprise me here. But if you think about it, even if he attacked me here, he'll most likely be using one of his versatile 3 attack cards. Either that or maybe a counter punch, but I don't think you will use a counter punch on an offense against the jackalope. That might have been possible. In any case, I had 3 feints in hand to defend. So even if I will not be able to cancel the effect, the 2 would be able to deflect most of these 3 attacks, except for the counter punch, of course. But again, I was surprised by Sherlock as he used his second the game is afoot. This secures the kill because I didn't have any skirmish or anything like that. But it also meant that Sherlock's main offensive capabilities, he has been pretty much defanged. So he'll probably be relying on his direct damage to finish me off at this point with all his confirmed suspicions, counter punches, stuff like that. But do note that he has already played 2, 1 confirmed suspicion and a counter punch, and also 1 master of disguise. So the rest of the match, or at least at this point, is me trying to apply the pressure on Sherlock as much as I could. I use Jackalope Horns to boost in, and then I was expecting him to use a deduce strategy or one of those elementaries. So instead, I simply hit him with a savagery. So he predicted 6. So the issue with Sherlock now is that with all his Watson cards, he'll just keep using them to boost them to get out of the way. Or I'll try to play catch up. That was where I think, I'm not sure whether this was a mistake. I actually used my savagery to give me a boost of 3 against him. If you think about it, I think savageries are quite important against Sherlock. During the 4 attack, will be able to get through most of his defenses, and one more damage would be good. One more guaranteed damage actually, because Sherlock doesn't really have any of those escape kind of mechanisms. But I used one of my 2 savageries, and here I hit him with another attack. But in this case, he managed to predict the 6 away. So if you're Sherlock, if you manage to predict 1 away, I think you're in a pretty okay spot. If you manage to predict 2 of these 6 attacks, then I think the game is more than or less in the bag for you. So keeping up the pressure again on Sherlock, considering that I have the card advantage. So one thing about using counter punch against larger than life, I think this is actually a very good, pretty good trade for Sherlock, because he does take 3 damage, sure, but still does 2 damage to me. But I mean, I got to eat that counter punch eventually anyway, so. So at this point in the game, I was starting to be careful about drawing cards with uh Bigfoot's ability, because we were kind of we have gone through most of our decks at this point, and against games with Sherlock, it tends to be about a game of exhaustion. So Bigfoot's ability is a May, so most of the time I didn't choose to take it. Alright, so another thing to note that if you're up against Bigfoot, one of the things you can do is to be very careful of ending up in spaces where Bigfoot can be adjacent to you and yet he's still counted as an adjacent zone. So something like this position, something like maybe this position. You don't want to end up in such a case, because this will allow Bigfoot to come next to you and yet still draw a card at the end of the turn and keep up the card advantage. Just be aware of this if you are going up against Bigfoot. Beware of the tempo and beware of your positioning. So with Eliminate the Impossible, I guess he was looking for a larger than life, my last one. But I mean, removing a hooks is still pretty alright. Or momentous shift. So one one play you can make is that you have confirmed suspicion. You could remove the momentous shift and then call for 3. So this would do 3 points of damage to me. I guess it did not. So he was holding the confirmed suspicions for my last larger than life. we're just checking to see how many we have played of each other's cards. Kind of wishing I had better offensive options though. And I started to draw through my deck because I was looking exactly for a crash through the trees. On a hindsight, I think just attacking with the feints I had in hand would have been enough. So attack once with the feint and then maneuver away. So interestingly, again, Sherlock uses a card to boost out of the way, which I think you shouldn't at this point. This point, he should be trying to attack me as much as he could or so. He uses another eliminate on possible. Desperately trying to look for that crashing through the trees. Or removing a Unmatched shift, that would be alright too. Removing skirmish would have been pretty alright. So he landed another counter punch on me. And we're actually pretty even in hit points right now. And he still had, if I'm not wrong, a couple of more confirmed suspicions. And one more counter punch. So... Oh wait, he has used all his 3 counter punches. Alright, at this point in the game, I was counting the number of cards Sherlock has in hand for defenses, and he probably was running out of them now. So considering that he has been discarding some versatile cards for boost. So imagine if he had kept his deduce strategy against this, that would totally prevent him from getting 2 damage here. Okay, I still have not drawn my larger than life, so I boosted my movement using a feint, wanting to keep a crash through the trees for if I drew a larger than life the next round. But I actually don't think I needed to do this. So one other alternative was that I could have used this to boost and then attack with a feint. This would allow me another attack with the feint at a later point in time. Because, I mean, at some point, Sherlock's going to run out of defense cards. So Sherlock desperately using Watson cards to get away from me. And I think at this point, we were down to our last few cards in hand already. In our deck. And, yep, at this stage, just waiting to draw my larger than life. So, for skirmish, I defended. And with Sherlock being exhausted, he's more or less dead. As my last card was a larger than life. So I spent the majority of game trying to avoid this confirmed suspicions. And I think I did pretty alright. So the main takeaways for this are that you're playing against Sherlock as Bigfoot. I think going after Watson early, as soon as you can, with both the Jackalope and Bigfoot, would have been an okay idea. In a way, Sherlock would be trying to be the bodyguard for Watson early game. And once you remove Watson, just pound on the pressure and hopefully don't get your big attacks elementary out or confirm suspicion out. Alright, that's it for today's after action report. See you in the next one.